This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up, and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions and answer them here on YouTube in video format. Ton of questions to get into, so let's just jump into it. Hey, Q, it feels like our roster is about stacked to the brim with talent when it comes to trades and free agency signings. So going forward, do you think the Browns will turn in-house and get guys like MJ, JOK, Coop, and others signed before they go out and get more? Look, Andrew Berry said at his closing press conference of last year that not only did they feel like they have a very talented group, but they felt like they have a great locker room dynamic. And we know in Cleveland, we've had talented rosters with horrible locker room dynamics. If you look at 2019, we've had not as talented locker rooms with good locker room dynamics like we've seen in 2020. This year, they got both. And when you have both in the NFL, that's when you lock in, right? That's when you start to be a little bit more hesitant about bringing in new dynamics to your locker room, and you really just kind of want to lock down the culture that you have. So that's, I think, the mode that the Browns are in, right? They're going to try to keep MJ. They're going to try to keep JOK. They're going to try to keep Coop. Anybody that they say is pivotal not only to the on-field product, but to the locker room culture that they have, because you know they accomplished something incredible last year with how they rallied around with all of these injuries, and that's the kind of group you want to keep together when they're that talented at this age and that resilient. That's the kind of group that you want to keep together. So yeah, I think the Browns aren't going to be as interested in bringing in free agents, because it's not just going to be about how talented is that free agent anymore. It's going to be about, can that free agent maintain and contribute to the culture that they have in the locker room? And that's a very difficult and rare thing to find, especially when you're not a team set to spend the most money at free agency. So yeah, I think the Browns are going to try to lock in their guys for those reasons. All right. The next question comes from my guy, N7 Trippy, who says, why do you think it's so hard for the Browns to develop wide receivers? I'm pretty unconfident in us projecting a guy like Coleman or Leggett because they failed to have Tillman ready as late as a wild card game. Won't that be a repeat of a bad situation? Well, I mean, we're also, when we talk about the Browns' history with wide receivers, we're talking about late round picks, and I think that's kind of flown under the radar, right? They haven't really spent a premium first or second round pick on a wide receiver. So if they do it this year, that'll be their first time. Cedric Tillman was a third round pick. Anthony Schwartz was a third round pick. And so was David Bell. So like, yeah, you're spending not insignificant resources at wide receiver, but it's not like you're taking the best wide receiver prospects available to you, given that the picks that you have. I think that's where it kind of gets skewed. I think that they've done a fine job developing wide receivers. I mean, you can't ignore that Donovan Peoples-Jones did develop into a solid 2 receiver for a couple of years, given that he was a 6th round pick. So I don't think that they're incapable of developing wide receivers. I just think that they haven't really spent any significant resources on bringing in wide receivers, and that's why they haven't had the same kind of churn and turnaround with it. Like, I know people bring up Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh spent a 2nd round pick on George Pickens, and it was an early 2nd round pick. Like, it's just not the same comp. And Cedric Tillman not being ready, I don't know what went into that, right? I don't know if that was Cedric Tillman just having a hard time transitioning to the game. It's tough for me to be that harsh on a rookie, but we'll see. We'll see. UK Browns fan says, serious one, would you rather go O-line or a wide receiver at 54, or are you happy with best player available? I'm confident that at 54, part of the best player available equation is probably going to be a tackle. It's probably going to be a wide receiver, maybe a defensive tackle, and maybe a linebacker. Maybe a linebacker. So I'm not really too picky. If the right offensive lineman is there and they take him, cool. There are guys that I don't want to take, right? I don't really mind the position. Like if they took Patrick Paul at 54, I wouldn't be thrilled. I don't love what Patrick Paul projects into being. I think people are high on him for no reason. But if they take, Junior Colson, who I don't really think the linebacker position is something that you value that high, but I do like Junior Colson or Edgerrin Cooper, then I'm fine with it, right? It's more about the player and how that player fits the roster and less about the position. So it's definitely going to be best player available for him. The next question comes from Retro Gaming Genesis, who says, with Joe Burrow coming back off a torn ligament, T. Higgins wanting a trade, and a lot of their support pieces being swapped out, what should we expect from the Cincinnati Bengals? The AFC North is the AFC North. I fully expect them to be a thorn at everyone's side, but as for the season overall, how do you think that they will get, and can they be serious contenders with the state of AFC? This is something I've gotten mixed answers about, even from people who cover the Cincinnati Bengals, right? There are some who are so confident in Joe Burrow's ability that he's going to just magically make them a contender. And there are some who feel like the run defense hasn't been addressed sufficiently enough, and that defense still has significant holes. I will say this about the Bengals. As much as we focus on Joe Burrow as the reason the Bengals have changed things, and Joe Burrow is a part of that. I don't want to get confused. I don't think Joe Burrow is the reason the Bengals are successful. He's a huge part of that. But another huge part of the Bengals' success since Joe Burrow has got healthy from the ACL tear he recovered from in 2020 is the defense that the Cincinnati Bengals have had. If you watch a lot of Cincinnati Bengals games, you'll notice that there are a lot of spurts where they just don't get a first down, or they just stall out and they just can't score. And they go on these dry spells offensively. They're not the most consistent offense. What allows them to be that, because they're so explosive, right? They're not a high percentage offense. What allows them to be that is a good defense. You see, when the Bengals look their best, it's when their defense gives them a lot of opportunities on offense. And last year, I think the biggest issue with the Bengals outside of Joe Burrow getting hurt was that their defense was inconsistent as well. And there were some games like the San Francisco game where you're like, man, the Bengals could be the best team in the universe. And then there were games where you saw that defense just kind of not be able to stop a nosebleed in the run game. And you just saw all the flaws there. So for the Bengals to be a championship contender, I really have to see that defense get back to that consistent level of play. Because while I think Joe Burrow is good enough to win you a playoff game against anybody, I do worry if that defense is going to be consistent enough for the Bengals to get away with it for 4 straight games or 3 straight games to get to a Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? That's where I worry about the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to be playoff contenders. They're going to be up there with the AFC North championship. Joe Burrow is good enough to make sure you're always in that conversation. But when it comes to being Super Bowl contenders, serious Super Bowl contenders, you have to ask if that defense is going to be consistent enough that they can win 4 straight against the toughest competition. The next question comes from Jay, who says, with all the AFC North teams finishing above 500 last season and actively making moves to stay competitive, where do you think the Browns sit? Look, I think the Browns have the best roster in the AFC North. I think it's not even close. You look at the Browns roster compared to Baltimore's roster, we have way more edge rushers. We have better corners. Our defensive interior, I think, is even with them. And yeah, they have the edge at linebacker, but it's not like we're that far behind, because I don't think JOK is that different from Roquan Smith as far as impact on the game. If you flip it to the offensive side of the ball, I think we have a better offensive line. The Ravens are still needing to replace 3 of their starting offensive linemen. The Browns are at a position where they have 6 starting offensive linemen. If you look at wide receiver, I think the Browns wash Baltimore completely at wide receiver. Tight end, I think, is a tie at this point. David Njoku, Mark Andrews, similarly effective guys. I think, obviously, Baltimore, they have the two-time MVP. They have more reliability at quarterback, but the Browns have so much around that quarterback position that it nullifies that to the point of when these two teams played in Baltimore last year and all the Browns had was a healthy Deshaun Watson, they were able to beat the Baltimore Ravens, despite the fact that they turned the ball over and gave up 2 possessions, 4 points on a muff punt and a pick 6. Like, the Browns did not play their best game against Baltimore and still were able to beat them on the road, because I think the Browns are just a better football team when they're healthy than Baltimore. And I think the same is true with Cincinnati. I think the same is true with Pittsburgh. I think the Browns have the best roster in the division. The question is, can they be healthy? If they're healthy, I think the Browns should be favorites to win the North. The Retro Gaming Genesis is back with another question. It says, looking to the East for a minute, do you think the Buffalo Bills have basically collapsed, or will they be able to pull out of this spiral and get back to competing? They've been a top name in the NFL for a while. It seems that they need to get through Kansas. See, here's where I'm at with Buffalo. I don't think Buffalo has spiraled, because I was never all as high on Buffalo as a lot of people got on Buffalo. To me, I always viewed Buffalo as the Philadelphia 76ers of the NFL. They were a team that has a great player in Josh Allen and a couple of good pieces around him that will always struggle to get out the second round. One, because there is a wild variance of which Josh Allen you're going to get sometimes, right? And when you talk about what wins Super Bowls, and I talked about this before when people got mad at me for saying, if I were trying to win a championship, I would rather have Brock Purdy than Justin Herbert, just because I know that Brock Purdy's going to be consistent, where Justin Herbert, there's no guarantee that he's going to be consistent. And we've seen his lack of consistency quarter to quarter, half to half, game to game, cost the Chargers playoff games. So if we go off that, Buffalo, another issue that they have is that Josh Allen, while he's very talented, while the ceiling he can reach is very high, he's not the most consistent quarterback out there, right? Which means he might look great in a wild card game. He might ball in that division game, but then you get a random one in that conference championship game, and the next thing you know, you out. When it's one and done, like the NFL is, consistency really does matter. And I don't know if I've seen enough out of Josh Allen to think that his consistency has risen. His floor has risen to a point to where I wouldn't worry about that in a playoff type scenario, the same way I'm talking about the Bengals defense. So I don't think they've collapsed. I think they're going to be probably the team that wins that division in the AFC East. They still have Josh Allen, and Josh Allen is good for like 10, 11 wins. The questions for Buffalo are going to be the same, though. Can they get past the second round? And I don't think they have the firepower to do it. And I think they have significantly less firepower than they had the year prior. So I think they're going to have a tough time getting past. Smole says, what sort of prospect would fall to 54 for you to want them over a wide receiver or offensive lineman at 54? What prospect? If Quinyon Mitchell fell to the Browns at 54, I would take Quinyon Mitchell. If, let's see, a non-offensive lineman, there's no running back that fits that criteria. There's not really a quarterback that's realistic that's not going to go in the top 10 that fits that criteria. Tight end, maybe. Like, it depends on how high you are on Tavion Sanders. I think he could be a starter eventually. So I think I would consider it. Yeah, if Johnny Newton gets to the Browns at 54, I would take Johnny Newton. Like maybe those guys, like no-brainer first-round guys, if they fall to you at 54, of course. RJ says, what's up, Quincy? My question is, will you guys keep Kareem Hunt? I don't know why you guys cut him. I thought he was a great choice for a second behind Chubb. The Browns aren't keeping Kareem Hunt just because I think they've hit the ceiling with what they can get out of Kareem Hunt. He's a short yardage guy. They feel like Donta Foreman can be just as good at those short yardage situations and give you some upside as an every down back. We tried to use Kareem Hunt last year as an every down back. It just wasn't happening for him. I think there's a role for him in the NFL, but he's just not the player that he was 4 years ago. And I think that's why they didn't keep Kareem Hunt. But that's it for Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.